Mayor's son laughed during the hearing. Judge Caprio's response became legendary. "Do you really think this matter?" he whispered, almost to himself, though the words carried across the courtroom as he adjusted his designer tie and glanced at the crowd. The mayor's son moved with the certainty of someone untouchable, as if the law itself were a minor inconvenience in his path. The polished leather of his shoes clicked against the floor, punctuating each step like a drumbeat of entitlement. Whispers rippled through the gallery, the soft hum of recognition and resentment. Everyone knew him. Everyone expected him to escape consequences. He didn't even look at the victims seated a few rows ahead. Their faces lined with anxiety and anger meant nothing to him. To him, they were background noise in a world that had always bent to his father's will. A subtle smirk lifted one corner of his mouth as he passed, almost mocking the very idea of justice. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing the arrogance before any testimony began. The judge entered, a figure of calm authority. The room fell silent instantly, as if the air itself held its breath. The mayor's son barely glanced up, leaning casually against the bench, chatting quietly with his attorney, an expression of effortless superiority plastered across his face. The contrast was striking, composed authority versus untamed privilege. Every detail screamed imbalance, and yet, in that moment, the courtroom had not yet acted, had not yet responded. He reclined in his chair with a faint chuckle, as if daring the proceedings to matter, unaware that the tension he carried was already a spark. The first chapter of reckoning had begun, the quiet storm of disrespect brewing, waiting for the right moment to ignite. "You expect me to take this seriously?" he asked, a chuckle slipping through before the prosecutor even finished her opening statement. The courtroom flinched. The mayor's son leaned back, arms crossed, a casual smirk daring the law to matter. It was the same arrogance he had carried in from the moment he entered, a shield forged by privilege, polished by the wealth and influence of a father who had never known accountability. The prosecutor's words cut through the audacity, crisp and unwavering. She described the night of the accident, the screech of tires on asphalt, the sudden chaos as pedestrians scrambled, the thud of bodies colliding with metal. Witnesses stepped forward, their voices trembling with memory and anger. A young woman spoke of the fear in her child's eyes, the way the world had suddenly felt unsafe, how one reckless choice had rippled across lives. Each testimony painted a picture of disregard, a sense that rules were for everyone else, not him. He interrupted, laughter spilling into the quiet. "Come on, it wasn't that bad." The words landed like stones, provoking murmurs of disbelief, gasps of outrage. The lawyer tried to reframe it, to soften the impact, to make it seem like a minor mishap. But every witness had their story, their evidence, their truth. The tension thickened. With every word, the disparity became more visible. Societal rules against one man's sense of entitlement. The courtroom waited, holding its breath, sensing the moment when privilege would finally meet accountability. His smirk remained, but behind it, a flicker of unease began to form. He could no longer simply laugh away the consequences. The reckoning had begun. "Enough!" The word cut through the murmurs like a blade. The judge's voice, calm yet unyielding, demanded attention. The mayor's son didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, laughter bubbling from his lips as a witness recounted the moment she'd feared for her life. "You really think this matters?" he whispered almost to himself, though the room heard every syllable. His smirk widened, and a ripple of disbelief moved through the public gallery. The courtroom had become a battlefield of wills. The judge maintained an unshakable composure, his gaze steady, voice deliberate. Every interruption, every scoff from the young man was met not with anger, but with quiet, piercing authority. It was as if the judge's silence alone could weigh heavier than the loudest taunt. Questions flew, objections were raised, voices collided, but the focus remained on the imbalance of power, a father's son versus the law itself. Victims' eyes followed every motion, pleading silently for acknowledgement, for justice, for someone to see the harm done and call it out. And in those moments, the mayor's son felt the first cracks of unease. He was powerful, yes, but he could not dismiss this room, this judge, this truth. Each sarcastic remark, each dismissive laugh, only drew sharper attention to his recklessness. The tension coiled tighter with every exchange. The courtroom waited with bated breath, sensing the pivot point. The judge's measured pause, the deliberate calm in the face of insolence, promised a reckoning. The young man's arrogance had carried him far, but it was clear now. Authority was ready to confront him, and when it did, there would be no easy escape. The screen flickered to life, grainy footage rolling across the monitors, tires squealing, headlights cutting through darkness, and then the collision, sudden, violent, irreversible. The mayor's son leaned forward for a fraction of a second, eyes narrowing, but quickly recovered, straightening in his chair with that same practiced air of indifference. "It's just a scratch," he muttered, as if words could erase the scene before him. The witnesses spoke next. A man described his twisted ankle, the fear that had lodged in his chest for weeks. A woman recounted the moment her groceries scattered, her child pulled from the path by sheer luck. Their voices were steady, measured, yet every syllable carried weight, painting consequences he had laughed off as trivial. The courtroom felt the magnitude of his actions, the injuries, the near tragedy, the lives forever altered. His lawyer tried to soften the impact, to frame it as an unfortunate accident, but the evidence was relentless. Each testimony layered guilt over charm, accountability over arrogance. The judge asked questions that pierced through his rehearsed excuses, highlighting contradictions and careless lies. "Did you even look before you turned?" the judge asked, and the room waited for the slip, the moment when denial would crumble. For the first time, the young man faltered. His casual dismissal could not withstand the reality of the aftermath. Emotional trauma, medical bills, shaken trust. The weight of human consequence pressed on him, a burden he had never imagined carrying. He could joke no longer, could laugh no longer, because the truth was undeniable. And the audience, every witness, every onlooker, sensed the shift. Arrogance was about to collide with accountability, and nothing in his world of privilege could prevent it. "Do you understand what you've done?" The judge's voice cut through the room, calm but carrying the weight of someone who had seen arrogance like this before. The mayor's son shifted uneasily, the smirk that had once defined him faltering for the first time. Laughter that had mocked the witnesses now felt hollow, inadequate, as the judge's words settled over him. "You think the world bends for you," the judge continued, "because your father holds power, because your name opens doors, because consequences are something other people face. But tonight, you face them. Not as a lesson in law alone, but as a lesson in humanity. Every choice you made, every careless action has left a mark on bodies, on trust, on lives, and you treated it as optional." The young man's bravado wavered. He opened his mouth, then closed it, caught in the gravity of words he could not dismiss. The judge's gaze swept the courtroom, lingering on those who had suffered. He spoke of empathy, responsibility, and the fragile trust that holds society together. Privilege had blinded the mayor's son to the impact of his actions, but here in this room, that illusion could no longer stand. Each word struck like a chisel, carving away the arrogance that had shielded him. The courtroom held its breath, witnesses and public alike feeling the moral weight of the reckoning. Authority had been challenged, yes, but moral clarity now prevailed. And in that moment, it became clear. This was no longer just a case about broken rules or reckless behavior. It was about confronting entitlement, seeing the human cost, and demanding accountability where it had long been denied. "Your actions have consequences," the judge said, his voice steady, deliberate, unyielding. The words landed like stones in the silence of the courtroom. Financial restitution to the victims, hundreds of hours of community service, public accountability, mandated and undeniable. Each detail of the sentence carried moral weight, a balance restored not just to law, but to human decency. The mayor's son sat frozen. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by something he had never felt before: shock, humbled. The arrogance that had carried him through a life of privilege now faltered under the weight of justice, measured not in fines alone, but in truth, in accountability, in the undeniable acknowledgement of harm done. He opened his mouth, tried a casual dismissal, but the room held him in a silence that refused to bend. The victims exhaled collectively, relief softening their faces. They had been seen, their suffering validated. The public gallery shifted, murmuring at the clarity of the moment. Authority had spoken, yes, but morality had spoken louder. The judge's closing reflection cut to the heart of the matter. Unchecked privilege is dangerous, but empathy and responsibility are non-negotiable. One moment of laughter, one act of disregard, could no longer shield a life from accountability. As the gavel struck, the tension finally eased, leaving a resonance that would outlast the courtroom walls. Outside, the world would see the ripple effects, the lesson that arrogance meets consequence, that moral reckoning matters, that justice is more than procedure. It is the courage to confront imbalance and restore human dignity. A camera lens caught his face as he emerged from the courthouse, and for the first time, the mayor's son could not hide behind charm or wealth. Flash bulbs exploded. Reporters shouted questions, but the words felt hollow to him, a reality he had never faced. Social judgment pressed on him heavier than any legal sentence could. The community had been watching, simmering with frustration, anger, and hope for justice. And now they had it. Victims stepped forward, their voices calm but firm. Relief threaded every word. They spoke of the fear lifted, the acknowledgement received, the sense of closure that law alone could not guarantee. Their testimonies, once fragmented and trembling, now stood whole, validated by consequence and by public reckoning. It was a quiet triumph, moral as much as legal, that the arrogant had been seen for what he was and held accountable in a way that resonated far beyond the courtroom walls. Commentators, social media, everyday citizens debated and reflected. One simple truth emerged. Privilege might shield someone for a time, but accountability, persistence, and moral clarity always find their way. The judge's measured authority and moral courage were celebrated. His words echoed in conversations across the city. He had not only delivered justice, he had reminded society that responsibility is not optional, and that empathy is as vital as law. The mayor's son faded into the crowd, humbled, stripped of illusions. And as the day drew on, a lingering quiet settled over the city. People thought about balance, about fairness, about the fragile trust that holds a community together. They reflected on what had been lost, what had been gained, and how one moment of courage and clarity could ripple outward, shaping not just a verdict, but a conscience. Justice had been done, and its echo would endure. The verdict came like a measured, deliberate blow. Liam was ordered to pay $75,000 in restitution, complete 150 hours of community service, mentoring teenagers on road safety, and receive a formal reprimand recorded publicly in Cedarfield's legal registry. Justice is not merely punitive, Caprio said. It is instructive. You are accountable, not just in law, but to your community and conscience. Shock and shame replaced the once confident smirk. Friends and family watched in silence. The gallery exhaled, absorbing the combination of tangible and symbolic justice. Privilege had been tempered by accountability, a clear signal that society's trust could not be bought or evaded. The room held its breath one final time, the first step toward humility planted. The public response was immediate. By May 15, 2024, Mario Callahan trial and Caprio justice trended regionally. Opinion columns dissected both the legal and moral outcomes. Citizens debated in cafes, online forums buzzed with analysis. Neighbors discussed lessons in accountability. Victims' families expressed relief, the weight of fear and uncertainty lifting. Liam's image fractured under scrutiny. Entitlement no longer protected him from judgment. Schools referenced the case in ethics classes. Students debated the consequences of privilege. Teachers assigned reflective exercises, and journalists followed every development. Caprio's words, "Privilege does not equal immunity," resonated beyond the courtroom, embedding themselves in homes and classrooms. Alone, Liam began to reflect, the first spark of introspection igniting within him. Months passed. Liam arrived early, rain soaking his jacket, hands cold as he guided teenagers through traffic safety exercises, repaired playground equipment, and assisted in school programs. Initially met with skepticism and quiet resentment, he persisted, physically exhausted, emotionally uncomfortable. Each gesture, a word of reassurance, extra time fixing a fence, patient instruction on bicycle safety, shifted perception, teachers noted growth, students documented engagement, neighbors witnessed consistency and accountability. Slowly, humility replaced arrogance. Liam's redemption was tangible, earned through labor and visible acknowledgement of past harm. Through consistent effort, trust began to rebuild, reputations reshaped, and lessons absorbed. By September, Cedarfield bore the case's ripples. Children regained confidence, traffic safety programs flourished, and civic engagement strengthened. Law students, journalists, educators referenced the Callahan trial as a model for ethics and restorative justice. Parents discussed accountability with their teens, emphasizing consequences regardless of background. Caprio's philosophy, privilege cannot shield one from responsibility, resonated widely. Liam's continued engagement, quiet but persistent, illustrated how accountability restores trust and moral integrity incrementally. The courtroom was behind him now, yet its lessons remained, echoing in the community. Accountability transformed more than one life. It reshaped the moral compass of a town, a reminder that justice and empathy, courage and reflection, endure long after the verdict is rendered. The prosecution wasted no time. Liam's reckless late-night street racing, Cedarfield streets at 2:47 a.m., tires screaming, parked cars trembling, was detailed meticulously. Officer Daniels described witnesses hiding behind doorways, the smell of burnt rubber, the panic of minor collisions narrowly avoided. Previous warnings from campus security were noted, quietly dismissed due to his father's influence. Attempts to smooth the situation, phone calls, discreet messages, emerged, revealing privilege in motion. Liam leaned back in his seat, rolling his eyes, muttering sarcastic asides under his breath. Judge Caprio's voice cut sharply. Maintain decorum. You will answer the questions without interruption. Each reprimand weighed on Liam's composure, subtle cracks appearing in a facade built on confidence and inherited protection. Neighbors, bystanders, and victims felt their stories validated, the gallery absorbing the human cost. Emotional tension rose with each detail, the risk to pedestrians, property near destroyed, and the slow revelation that entitlement could not erase recklessness. Witnesses painted a picture of habitual disregard, each anecdote layering moral weight atop legal accountability. Liam's confidence faltered, brief glimpses of uncertainty crossing his features. The first cracks of arrogance showed, foreshadowing the collapse of a carefully curated sense of immunity. Security footage displayed Liam's car darting at 65 miles per hour in a 30-mile zone. A cyclist swerved sharply. A parked delivery truck's side panel bore the vehicle's mark. Emma Roberts, 14, described her terror. I thought I was going to die. The tires screeched right behind me. I couldn't move. Mr. Jameson, 72, recalled nearly being hit retrieving his morning paper. Officer Daniels calculated reaction times, braking distances, and near-catastrophe timelines with precision. The prosecution revealed attempts to leverage influence, contacts within the precinct, messages left at the detective's desk, quiet whispers of intervention. Each exposure peeled back a layer of systemic vulnerability when privilege intersected with responsibility. Liam's smirk faded as footage replayed repeatedly. Each near miss pressed uncomfortably against his sense of invincibility. The gallery exhaled collectively, some in relief, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Privilege collided with consequence. Caprio's silence amplified the gravity, underscoring impartiality. The courtroom became a witness to recklessness in motion, a tangible demonstration of risk, fear, and the stark contrast between casual arrogance and human vulnerability. Moral reckoning hovered over every seat, waiting for confrontation. Emma Roberts, trembling yet resolute, recounted the moment. I thought I was going to die. The tires screeched right behind me. I couldn't move. Gasps echoed, some eyes welling, some faces averted. Liam muttered a weak apology. I didn't mean. Why didn't you care? Emma's words landed like stones in water, rippling through the gallery. Even Liam's friends looked uncomfortable, unsure of how to respond. Caprio remained composed, letting the moral weight unfold naturally. Each shallow breath, each averted glance from Liam revealed a first confrontation with consequences beyond charm or money. Arrogance collided with innocence, and the true human cost of entitlement became undeniable. Viewers sense the internal struggle. For the first time, consequences feel tangible, unavoidable, and deeply personal. Your father's badge does not grant you immunity. The words hang in the air, crisp and uncompromising, slicing through Liam's half-smirk as he shifts uneasily in the witness chair. The courtroom holds its breath. Judge Caprio leans forward, hands folded, voice steady but precise. Mr. Callahan, your lineage and your father's service do not exempt you from responsibility. Society trusts us to act justly, not shield one another from consequences. Liam mutters under his breath, a soft, ineffective charm meant to deflect. I didn't, Caprio interrupts with a calm yet unyielding tone. No, you will not distract from the gravity of your actions with excuses or inherited privilege. Ethics are not optional. Responsibility is not selective. Reckless behavior fractures the trust your community places in all of us, a trust that cannot be bought or borrowed. The young man fidgets. His eyes avoid the judge, darting to his father, whose expression is taut with conflicted pride and shame. Liam swallows the first real tremor of unease breaking through his cultivated arrogance. He attempts a half-smile, then quickly retracts it, recognizing it does nothing here. Caprio's voice continues, measured yet relentless, each word a moral hammer. Accountability is the measure of character. You are not merely standing before this court, you stand before your neighbors, your peers, and your own conscience. Every choice, every moment of negligence, leaves a mark that extends far beyond yourself. The gallery leans forward. Silence stretches and thickens, the emotional weight palpable. Liam's friends, who entered the courtroom with smirks and whispers, are suddenly quiet, discomfort rippling across their faces. He shifts again, small defensive movements betraying the unraveling of confidence once anchored in familial influence. Caprio does not relent. Privilege does not shield you. Entitlement does not erase consequence. The community, the victims, and your own integrity demand you understand this truth. The courtroom absorbs the confrontation like a held breath. Ego meets morality, charm meets principle, and the collapse of entitlement becomes undeniable. Liam's first real encounter with the weight of his actions is complete. The air is heavy, the stakes crystal clear, and every observer senses that the moral reckoning has only just begun, the verdict looming as the inevitable balance between justice and redemption. The Porsche had come to a stop approximately 40 yards ahead of the impact site. The driver, later identified as Cameron Hargrove, was standing outside the vehicle, phone in hand. He was not checking on the victim. He was not calling 911. He was making a call, and based on phone records obtained later, that call was to his father's chief of staff, placed at 11:48 p.m., less than 1 minute after the collision. A murmur rippled through the gallery, low and indignant. Judge Morales glanced toward the audience, her expression firm, and the murmurs subsided. When I approached Mr. Hargrove, Reyes said, his tone measured but edged with something harder, his first words to me were not an inquiry about the victim's condition. His first words were, "Do you know who I am?" The room erupted in whispers. Parents in the gallery exchanged glances, their faces tight with disbelief. Cyclists sitting near the front row shook their heads, lips pressed into thin lines. Journalists scribbled furiously, the scratch of pens against paper audible in the tense silence. Judge Morales raised a hand, and the murmurs ceased. "Continue, Officer Reyes." I identified myself and informed Mr. Hargrove that he was required to submit to a breathalyzer test. He refused. I explained that refusal to comply would result in immediate license suspension and additional charges. His response was to demand that I contact someone higher up. He was dismissive, agitated, and showed no concern for the victim lying injured 40 yards behind him. The prosecutor stood holding a tablet. "Your Honor, I'd like to present body cam footage from Officer Reyes, recorded at the scene." Judge Morales nodded. "Proceed." The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the video began to play on the mounted screens. The footage was grainy but clear enough. The timestamp read 11:52 p.m. Officer Reyes's voice came through the audio, calm and professional. "Sir, I need you to step over here and submit to a breathalyzer test." Cameron's voice sharp and dismissive. "I'm not doing that. Do you know who my father is?" "Sir, your father's identity is irrelevant to this traffic stop. You are required by law." "I'm not taking orders from you. Get your supervisor on the phone. Now." The footage continued, showing Cameron pacing, phone still in hand, his movements jerky and impatient. In the background, paramedics could be seen working frantically over Miguel Santos's motionless body. Cameron never looked in that direction. Not once. The video ended. The lights came back up. The gallery sat in stunned silence. The kind of silence that carries the weight of collective judgment. Judge Morales's eyes shifted to Cameron, whose face remained impassive, jaw set, arms crossed. He looked bored, as if the footage had been a tedious formality. His attorney, Marcus Whitley, leaned in and whispered something, but Cameron didn't respond. He simply stared forward, refusing to meet the judge's gaze. Officer Reyes cleared his throat, drawing attention back to the stand. Mr. Santos was transported to Del Seaton Medical Center at 12:03 a.m. His injuries included a shattered pelvis, 3 fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and internal bleeding. He underwent emergency surgery and was in critical condition for 72 hours. The prosecutor nodded. "And Mr. Hargrove's behavior at the scene, did it change at any point?" Reyes's jaw tightened. "No. He remained focused on protecting himself. At no point did he ask about the victim's condition. At no point did he express remorse. His only concern was avoiding accountability." The gallery reacted audibly, gasps, murmurs of disgust, the rustling of coats as people shifted in their seats. A woman in the third row whispered to her neighbor, voice tight with anger. "He left a man dying in the street and called his daddy's lawyer." Judge Morales allowed the reaction to settle, then spoke, her voice calm but laced with steel. "Officer Reyes, in your 15 years of service, have you ever encountered a driver involved in a serious collision who refused to render aid or cooperate with law enforcement in this manner?" Reyes met her gaze. "No, Your Honor. This was the most egregious display of indifference I have witnessed." The judge nodded slowly, her eyes shifting once more to Cameron. His expression had not changed. If anything, it had hardened, jaw clenched, eyes cold. A man who believed the world owed him deference, not accountability. The courtroom absorbed the testimony like a body absorbing a wound, slow, painful, irreversible. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no retreating from it now. Marcus Whitley rose with the practiced grace of a man who had spent decades turning courtrooms into stages where the law bent to his carefully constructed narratives. He adjusted his cufflinks, straightened the lapels of his charcoal suit, and addressed Judge Morales with the kind of deference that was calculated to flatter without surrendering authority. His voice was smooth, measured, the tone of someone accustomed to winning before the arguments even began. "Your Honor, if I may," he began, holding a slim folder in one hand. "The defense moves to suppress the evidence obtained during the traffic stop on the night of February 14, 2024. We contend that Officer Reyes lacked sufficient probable cause to initiate the stop, that the breathalyzer request was coercive and violated my client's Fourth Amendment rights, and that the entire encounter was conducted in a manner that undermines the integrity of the evidence presented." He paused, letting the words settle, his eyes sweeping briefly across the gallery as if inviting them to consider the reasonableness of his argument. Cameron sat beside him, arms crossed, chin tilted slightly upward, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He nodded along as Whitley spoke, the gesture casual, almost bored, as if the motion were a formality that would inevitably be granted. Whitley continued, his tone gaining a subtle edge. "Officer Reyes clocked my client's vehicle at 87 miles per hour, but the radar calibration records for that night have not been provided to the defense. Without confirmation that the equipment was functioning properly, we cannot accept the speed measurement as accurate. Furthermore, my client's refusal to submit to a breathalyzer test is his constitutional right, And framing that refusal as evidence of guilt is both prejudicial and legally unsound.